So much for holding this hearing, and I can't tell you how pleased I am that we're going to have the vote that we're going to have this week on the floor.
Thank you. Thanks for all your help.
No, I just appreciate your sticking with it until the very end. And you mentioned housing, and Mr. Novogradac, that's where I'd like to ask a question. Everywhere I go in Colorado, I hear about the lack of workforce housing everywhere. And the lack of just affordable housing generally and most broadly understood. Every single part of our economy, I mean, the people in every part of our economy, none of them can afford housing. I was the superintendent of schools in Denver many years ago, and one of the amazing things about being in that job was that in Denver, unlike Seattle or San Francisco, the teachers that worked in the district could actually live in the district and could live near the kids where they taught, live near the schools where they taught. Today, no teacher can afford to live in Denver 15 years later. No teacher can afford to live in the inner suburbs around Denver. And we're now asking people who are working one of the hardest jobs, the least well-paying jobs in America, the most important jobs in America, to now commute, an hour and a half each way for the privilege of being able to do this essential work. So I look at this as, I guess I would say that part of creating a thriving community is making sure that people that are working in a community can actually afford to live there, that people don't have to travel long distances, although we're seeing this in rural parts of the state as well. It's not just in urban parts. It is absolutely everywhere. And we've also seen it all across the country. In Denver, the house price to income ratio in 1980 was 3.2. In 2022, it hit 7.1. So when people say, as they often do, we're never going to be able to afford to live where our parents lived. I was with some people this weekend who were saying that, as parents, they're actually thinking about how to buy houses for their kids because their kids will never be able to afford. And that's what a 7.1 ratio to income looks like compared to 3.2 when it was affordable. Home price to income ratios have reached all-time highs in 78 of the country's 100 largest markets, where more than 295 million Americans live. That's virtually everybody. And we know there's a huge problem with housing supply. I get that. We've got to build more units. But in the last few years, private activity bonds have become a popular tool for financing affordable rental housing. I wonder, with all that wind-up, given the affordable housing crisis that we have most broadly understood, again, how can we improve the current private activity bond scheme to facilitate housing construction in this country? And are there other things that you would do if you had a magic wand?
Yes, there's a lot of things I would do if I had a magic wand, but focused on the private activity bonds for the moment to address that question. I think that lowering the technical finance buy test that you have to meet in order to combine private activity bonds with low-income housing tax credits would be a huge step. Lowering it from 50% to 25% is in the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, and that would more than double the ability of private activity bonds to finance residential rental housing. And then the bill that you'll be voting on Thursday would lower the test from 50% to 30% for 2 years, and that would be super additive in terms of adding to the housing supply. A second adjustment or thing that I would point out with respect to private activity bonds is in some rural areas and suburban areas, it's not as financially feasible to use private activity bonds to finance residential rental housing. The Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act includes a basis boost provision that would help rural areas. There's a provision in there to help tribal areas and even a more general area to help make more of those developments financially feasible outside of rural and tribal areas. And to the extent that Congress could enact those provisions, we could see private activity bonds funding dramatically more affordable rental housing units.
Thank you for that. Ms. Nelmark, I have 30 seconds left, and if the chairman will let me have it. I wanted to shift actually to tribal lands to get your thoughts about the history that we have of unfulfilled obligations and the increasing nightmares that tribes are dealing with in terms of in terms of the new market tax credit. For example, in my state, tribes in Colorado, like the Ute Mountain Ute and the Southern Ute tribe, want to take advantage of tax programs like the new market tax credit, but too often the structure of the credit itself gets in the way. I can tell by your nodding that you know what I'm talking about, so let me just turn it over to you for the rest of it to see if you can give us some advice about how we could make this work better for tribes.
Sure. We've done a number of native deals, new markets native deals, and there are a few issues, one of which is the valuation gap that I discussed earlier, with as much as 50% reduction in value off the cost of building. But in terms of what this could do is the structuring of the borrowers, in essence, in new markets, the qualified low-income community businesses. It's unclear if tribal corporations are eligible to be those qualified borrowers. And so we have to structure around that, which increases the complexity, the cost, the time, everything involved there. So if Congress could amend the definition of a Qualic B to include a tribally owned corporation, that would be tremendously helpful.
Okay, that sounds like a good place to cut some red tape, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.